All right. So today we'll begin on a new treatise. So we have done through the treatise for marriages, couples. So it's very often that the young ones, the young adults, looking for their life partners would be keen on knowing their compatibility to their love partners. But also for the loved ones, even until to the mature age, would be the career. Therefore, as we look into the career, I have prepared yet another file, and this time we'll be looking into the Excel file for career. So the Excel file for career will be, in a way, it's also something similar, the compatibility for yourself against what we consider to be your superior and as well as your so-called and also, of course, your superior as well as your subordinates. And so later in due course, once the Excel software is ready, then I'll share with some of you for those who will qualify to own them, yeah, as it is. All right. So therefore, sooner or later, I will build up the entire comprehensive analysis to look at the person in terms of their health, in terms of their wealth, in terms of the career, and also their love. So these are the most popular types of questions when we refer to pasture analysis. All right, so let's go through the refresher for career. As we look into the career, as usual, the very first thing that we always consider without fail will be the day master. So as usually, we all begin with the day master. So with the day master, we can refer to the main stamp characteristics, whether the person is a jiawut or a wu earth or a ren water. So whether it's a ren water, jiawut or wu earth, the characteristics of that person would play the pivotal role. And so, as we then look into the second item, we then refer to the 10 gods. And so, as we refer to the 10 gods, we then come to focus on the career pillar. And sure, as we often refer to, the career pillar will be the pillar that is the mud. So we will consider that the career pillar is one to which when the person enters into society, when you enter into society. So as you enter into society, that would be where we consider the manifestation of your career pillar. And so the first pillar we then refer to would be your family. And in terms of family, very often we refer to the grandparents. So therefore, sometimes the man pillar is also referred to your parents, and while the family refer to your ancestors or to your grandparents. And so here in the month pillar would then be the society. And more often than not, the month also represents the season. So the season plays yet the same important role to define the structure for the person. So what do we do? Well, we identify the day master, we refer to the season, we refer to comparing the day master to the season, which then brings you the useful gods. And so once we have your Yongshen, once you bring out your useful gods, Yongshen, then that would be the very key role to play. So very often the analysis refers to the pillar, and the pillar here would be the man pillar. So therefore we refer to the man pillar to be the first. But that is for basic. That is for newbies. So for newbies, for beginners, we would often go this way. So the go this way is to look into what is in your career pillar, your season, and then go for it. But of course, in more advanced, it is not necessarily your month pillar, but the useful gods. And so it may be best to manifest and to strengthen the energy for the so-called your useful gods. So that's why we want to move along to appreciate. Okay, so come, let's move along to the 10 gods once again. As we know your 10 gods and what do they represent. And we have gone through some past refresher onto this part, whether your 10 gods would be under the influence, wealth, resource, output, or the companion stars. And so therefore, this is where we then make a look into the 10 gods. Come, let's take a look into the chart on the table. Here we have a sample which is known as Steve Jobs. So we'll take Steve Jobs. Now, Steve Jobs being the founder or the co-founder of Apple, of course, we may consider that he became the face of the company. But having said that, that he's the face of the company, Steve Jobs, he may have a superior. Now, the context of superior, here in my software or in the file that I'm developing, I just call it superior. So if the natal chart, if you are an employee, then superior becomes quite clear, the immediate upline. Now, not necessarily we want to consider that all uplines or immediate upline would be superior. It can definitely go all the way up to the CEO. And for a CEO of a company, then the board of directors or the chairman may be considered to be the superior. Because in a way, the CEO reports to the board of directors. And even though Steve Jobs may have been a co-founder, but after the company has gone public, after selling your shares away, you may become a minority shareholder, a key shareholder, a cornerstone shareholder, but nonetheless holding on to a salaried position, a CEO, despite the millions of dollars as salary, or maybe just a $1 salary with millions of share options, but nonetheless, there is still a reporting. Therefore, we may want to consider the reporting line. And likewise, Steve Jobs would have recruited and also invite or basically bring upon the recruitment of the salary. So here we may find that the chart, if we have Steve Jobs on this chart here, then the superior may be in the name of the John Scully. So in this case, John Scully may be the superior here. And so John Scully was born on 6th of April, 1939. And so remember, if you do have, when you have this software, remember to type in the text. It is a text. And here, as the story goes, Steve Jobs invited uh, somebody from the beverage, which goes by the name of Jean-Louis Gasset. So Jean-Louis Gasset was born in 23rd of July 1944. So in a way, he may become the VP of marketing, and he was a recruitment. He was recruited by Steve Jobs. All right. So here, as we look at the chart, we would then want to consider the interrelationship between people. Now, I wanted to have yet another natal chart, which is called partner, which may be considered to be your peers. But nonetheless, the analysis would be similar with the superior. So there's no change, right? There's no change if whether you want to consider superior or consider your partner. So partner or superior will have the same impact. So as a result, I did not wish to create yet another natal chart because it's pointless to do so. Now, of course, an employer or a person like Steve Jobs would have multiple employees. So you might have, lots of them, or even to the thousands of them. And therefore, this limitation of the software is only to capture the date one by one. Not really. I have actually also created the table where you can actually key in 10,000 dates and we can plot all 10,000 charts at the same time. But of course, to view it, it would have to be in a different form of visualization. All right, but never mind, that is still in the work in progress. So this is just part one of how we can use this software, or how this software can be used to look into your relationship between you, your superiors, and your subordinates. All right, so well, let's take a look into the line, and we'll start off with the basic. So as we go back to basic, what do we do with Steve Jobs? Well, the starting point is the day master, ping fire. Now again, run by me. When you read when you read fire element, what is very important? What is different from the rest? When you read ping fire element, what is the unique consideration? When you read when you read fire people, yes, correct. Jenny, you're right. Thank you. The time of birth is important. The time of birth is important. More so when you have both. More so when you have, because when you have both, we then need to know which is stronger. And of course, born during daytime, ping fire is stronger, and nighttime, ping fire is stronger. So in a way, the sun shines during the day, the moon shines during the night. All right. So here, as we then luckily, Steve Jobs being a celebrity over Estradians, you will then have the time at the So it's born at sunset, 7 to 9. So really at a dim. So in a way, relatively slightly big. But here, there's a fire born in the month of spring. So in the month of spring, which is at the growth stage of the fire can be relatively strong. And of course, there is rooted. So there is rooting. So fire born in spring is still strong, and there is rooting. Right. So therefore, we identify the day master, we identify the so-called, we identify the so-called your the season. All right, and from the chart, the main chi will be Jia. The main chi will be Jia, and it is Jia wood to ping fire. What is the 10 gods? What is the 10 gods of Jia wood to ping fire? Resource, and more importantly, indirect or direct? Indirect. Therefore, if it is an indirect resource, right? If it's indirect resource, then this table 1 here will then look into the typical archetype of the core archetype of the character. And so Steve Jobs is indirect resource. Indirect resource, Pian Yin, is knowledge, education that is outside the box, unconventional thinker. Indirect resource is the innovator. The innovator is one that is about R&D, design, creative fields, and also, of course, metaphysics, because it's indirect resource. So Steve Jobs' indirect resource will be strong because that is the season. So the season for ping fire in spring will then be indirect resource. And of all the 5 elements, fire is the element that can change. Fire is a change agent because fire can transform. Heat melts ice, solid ice into water, and water into steam. And therefore, fire is naturally an innovator, and a fire indirect resource would strengthen the person's character. Therefore, here Steve Jobs would be an innovator, a thinker outside the box, and would be innovative and would create. And fire is technology. And so for the fire element, that would be the day master. And so we may want to look at the core archetype career structure of the person. Now, the next part will be consider the useful gods. And for the schedule. But of course, the schedule is never complete. There will be occasions to which useful gods must be outside. So first and foremost, useful gods must be present. All natal charts must have useful gods. And so here we see that the useful gods are, according to the schedule, would be absent. So if the useful gods are absent, they become void. And once they become void, they become a red flag. If they become something that can be potentially onerous to the day master. And therefore, the arrival of the luck pillar, either Keng metal or Ren water for Steve Jobs, this would be hazardous. So it would be a point of danger for the day master to see Ren water and to see Keng metal. Right. So therefore, there must be certain steps to be taken to mitigate the energy for rainwater and Keng metal. Therefore, we can see how. So there are many ways to mitigate. Marriage is one. That's why we look into how people seek life partners that have elements containing their void gods. So to be in a company of people, the elements that will be useful, there will be some kind of affinity. Okay, now coming back to Steve Jobs, there must be useful gods. And so since we are not able to use the ones in the charts, no, sorry, we are not able to use the one that is in the schedule. Therefore, we must now relook the chart and to consider what would be a useful god. Now, the useful god is to regulate. So we may find that spring can still be cold, especially when it's early spring. So if early spring is cold, then some warmth will be good. And so some ting fire can be some element of useful god. So therefore, this may be considered to be the useful god. To bring warmth to an early spring. Now, pink fire, day masters are often most independent. If we find wood people, wood are needy. Wood is very needy. A tree needs water, it needs earth, it needs sun. Wood people are very needy. The element needs a lot more of the other elements. But pink fire is the sun. It is up there in the sky, independent and free from tremendously the needs of other elements. So usually, what does pink metal, what would pink likes to combine with? Pink would like to combine with sin metal. That's right, Diego. Diego. So therefore, sin metal may be the useful god. Now, determining the useful god is a mixture of wisdom, experience, and sometimes a bit of a guessing. We could be wrong. So the reader of the chart may misread the useful god, especially for this chart, because the schedule is not helpful. The schedule gives out nothing, therefore it's not useful. So it looks like we have to now look at the chart and to see. So two things we must remember. Number one, useful god must be present. Oh yes, Big Pui. Pink fire is very generous, like the sun gives and gives and gives, and don't expect much in return. And pink fire people are very consistent. The sun rises at the same time every day. Well, not really the same time for the fall. The same time as per expected. Whether winter or summer, the sun rises as per expected, and it sets at the precise time. So therefore, precision is one of the hallmarks of a pink fire. Okay, so here we may take a guess, an educated guess, and we can try to experiment with Steve Jobs' life to then finally determine where exactly would the useful gods be. Okay, so after identifying the useful gods, then perhaps we can then try to refer to the useful gods to be the elements that is used. All right. So with that in mind, we can then try to, of course, look into the useful gods and then see what will be the 10 gods. Okay. So what is Ting fire? What is Ting fire to a Ping fire? And therefore, that would be the rock wealth. So the rock. So rock wealth is about partnership. Rock wealth is about colleagues. Rock wealth is the party animal. And here, the rock wealth is in the graveyard of the way in summer. Right? Therefore, there will be one. So we have to consider if that is the useful god. Now, the next one is then sin metal. So, what is sin metal? What is sin metal to ping fire? So, what is sin? Sin metal would then be wealth. Would then be the direct. Direct. All right. So, if my guess is correct, if my guess is correct, thinking out of the schedule and try to suggest. Therefore, direct wealth represents a business that is meticulous, the manager. Direct wealth represents, now direct wealth and indirect wealth is where direct wealth are penny pinchers. Direct wealth are very meticulous to details. They know their numbers very well. Don't ever bluff a direct wealth day master. Because direct wealth, they know their numbers, they are very particular and precise. Indirect wealth, you can bluff them because they are BS people. Business strategy. They talk business strategy, they talk big. So indirect wealth is big picture guy, not interested in the details. While direct wealth is very much into the details and sometimes very tactical and very operation. Therefore, this would be the characteristics of the wealth, direct wealth, and so on. Diogo asked the question. All right. So therefore, since it's the hour of the dog, does it needs to be clash? Yeah, you're right, Diogo. Therefore, what does dog clash with? The dragon. That's right. Fantastic. Therefore, if the useful gods are all hidden, especially in graveyard stars, both the dog and the goat, and therefore this would be yes, that is correct. Therefore, that's where there is clash, isn't it? So with the dog clashing with the dragon, so it's very good. So therefore, there is release. There is a release. So there's a release of both the Ting Fire and Sin Metal as well. In a way, Diogo, not really, not really, not really. It's not inherently activated. It's activated when you have children. The spouse pillar is activated when you got married. Therefore, in a way, I mean, if you're referring to a few months old babies, only the first pillar matters. And then, of course, when a person starts to enter into society, which of course in today means kindergarten, when the child first step out from the house and mingle into society, then it is activated. So, in a way, it is inherently activated, but there must be still a passage of like getting married, getting a child, and so on. So it doesn't mean full snap, you have all four pillars up front ready. But yes, once once you have that, then straight away the inherent clash has taken place. Taken. All right, now the software is not fully complete yet, but of course, Fuicom. Therefore, the Earth dog, she is a Fuicom. A Fuicom pillar is definitely a pillar that you would like to have. The commander pillar, the hard to die pillar, the one that can push and reach to the top. Many great peoples out there, when you look into the charts, many of them have the free kongs. Therefore, here Steve Jobs has a free kong in the hour pillar. So looks like the hour pillar is quite a pillar for Steve Jobs, that have that useful God. All right, so that's where we would like to look into. Now the thing is, if let's say it is not inherently activated, if let's say that there's no dragon around to clash with the dog, which would be useful, then maybe in terms of career advice, in terms of, I mean, we're here to look into how we can advise our clients what should be the kind of behavior that can be useful. And so for Steve Jobs, uh, pay attention to details, be meticulous, be an innovator. Those are the kind. And of course, the Rockwell, the competitor in terms of sales, competitive entrepreneurship. These are the hallmarks of a Rockwell. And so do what your useful gods are. Do what your useful gods are. More so than just simply looking at the manpila. Simply looking at the manpila. Now, generally, we do find earth to weaken fire. So we find earth to weaken fire. So the stems are not tremendously very useful, but it is actually the hidden branches that will be there. So it's more for the innate side of things. All right, so here we have the 10 gods, and then from there, we make reference to how each of them manifests itself as it is. You identify the 10 gods for your career. Okay, Claudia. So what if the description doesn't match up? Now, here we look at it this way. The Now when you say it doesn't match, when you say it doesn't match, you question yourself because at a basic level, at an introductory level, we tell you that your structure is the one, because this is career pillar. So we then take this to be your characteristics. And so Claudia, if you come back to say that that's okay, so therefore, what is OH? Hurting officer, you mean? Do you mean HO or OH? HO, HO. Okay, so basically yours is the hurting officer. Yours is the hurting officer, but it's in the man pillar. But now the question comes in: is that your useful God? Is that your useful God? Is that your useful? Now we do find that here Jia is, but whether Jia is needed, but Jia is a resource that will provide for the fire. It can be a structure, but useful gods can come into the other. Oh, okay. Now, when you look into hurting officer, okay, no, maybe not politics or public speaking or hurting officer, but to a certain degree, hurting officer is also a change agent, an agent for change. Hurting officer challenges the current mainstream thinking, change the current status quo. And so is eventually hurting officer is a job that results in changing people's life in a manner that you change their status, you change their location, you change. So in a way, even someone working in human resource as a recruiter is a hurting officer. Is a hurting officer, because in a way that the person has that change. So not necessarily the singer, the artist, the performer, where you can combine together, right? And perhaps if that's not the case, then that's not really the useful gods. Then we can look into what are the useful gods for the person. So we can see. So I mean, if let's say, for example, this may be your career. So in fact, even though we can look at the career, we can see that this can be manifest in another pillar. In a way that all these elements in your chart, if you have it, you can make use of it. Hurting officer makes good counselor. Pick quick, right? Hurting officer is not necessarily anti-government. It doesn't mean it's anti-government. Also, it could, because it tries to play or create change into the system. But it can always work within the system itself. That's okay. Okay, so now once again, we can map out the four pillars. Your year pillar represents your early life, uh, broader industry. So we can refer to broader industry. We can refer to your high level bosses at times. The month pillar will then be the primary career pillar when you enter into society, coming into it. But naturally, one would say that the 10 gods on the month pillar is the powerful indicator that you would be expected to find very engaging. But Claudia, coming back to would you consider that your job is more outdoor than indoor? Okay, system and managing, corporate software development. All right. No, you use the word okay, fine, not managing. So I would consider it to be more indoor. Actually. All right. So you might have some automating process, right? Indoor mostly, right? All right. Okay, but well, of course there'll be a lot more questions to get it. But we'll look into your use. What are the 10 gods of your useful gods? Yeah, the 10 elements that your useful god represents. Correct. Now next, of course, we look into the day pillar. So the day pillar is will resonate more during this age. That of course represents your pillar. So your pillar represents your core values, identity, and so on. And the hour pillar represents your later life in terms of your investments, legacy projects, and likewise. And usually, of course, if the hour pillar is the best pillar, then it may be considered that this person may be a late bloomer, a late bloomer in. Okay, come. We move along to the next chapter. We'll try to run through very quickly. And so, more often than not, as we come to the official luck, the two key 10 gods will be your officer, naturally, the direct officer, and the seven key. And so, when we refer to career for both male and female, we'll then refer to your direct officer and the seven key. Naturally, from a conventional point, it is a direct officer that we would find more favorable. Basically stable, predictable, law abiding, by the book, provide better structure. And the resource, which of course will be the direct resource. That will be positive, and indirect resource, which as certain traditionally a bit more unfavorable. But in today's world, both of them would be equally fine. And so from here, it would be considered that the official luck is if the officer star is your useful god. is a useful god. If the officer star is a useful god. So if the officer star is a useful god, then that would be somewhat, in the traditional sense, a favorable outcome, an auspicious outcome for reaching to higher levels in management. Okay, so here we would like to map out into the officer star, and there are also some of these noble combinations. So there are 4 noble combinations, 4 key ones. And once again, as you know, there are so many rules and so many poems. So people in the past, without the use of softwares, without the use of written book, I would say, have to memorize. And so people in the past, especially when Pacha was popular during the Tang Dynasty, so so they will have to memorize poems in order to and poems that comes in 4 words. So these are the 4-word poem, which is very popular even until now. Is where they would then try to rehearse and then try to bring about to recall the memory of how this combination works. But we don't really need to memorize all these things. The logic, of course, has already been introduced from our earlier session. Just remember the harmonic flow. So if you can remember the harmonic flow, then that would be, well, just fine. Okay, now the first is the Shah, Yin. 7 killing, killing and resource. So Shah Yin basically is 7 killing. And 7 killing, of course, produces resource. So there is a harmonic flow between officer luck and your resource luck. Because again, we will consider that if you are the day master, so if Steve Jobs being a fire element, this is a day master, then wood produces fire, wood is your resource, and then water will then be your officer luck. And so officer produces wood, water produces wood, wood produces fire. And therefore, if officer and resource are present, then this would be the first noble combination. All right. So once again, absolutely no need for you to memorize the poem or to even remember the term. Just get a feel that if there is a flow, whenever you find a pair, or not really a pair, a match of 3 elements in a flow, that would be they considered to be the first noble combination. Because here 7 killing is traditionally unfavorable, so with resource weakening the 7 killing, then becomes favorable. And therefore, this is where the intense pressure and the challenges of the 7 killing become transformed into wisdom strategy, because here 7 killing produces resource. And therefore, this would make a very good resourceful CEO of a turnaround, or one that is able to solve problems. So 7K provides the problem, resource provides the solution. Now, if the first one will be 7K produces resource, the second combination is the direct officer producing resource. And we'll say that the direct officer producing resource will be considered to be the one that brings resource. And therefore, with direct officer with resource, then that would be considered to be more stable, more by the book type. And again, so these two first combination is about the same thing, having officer produces resource that produces the day master. Now next we look into the third combination. The third combination represents again the presence of 7 killing, but the day master is strong enough to withstand. So if the day master is born in the right season, the day master is rooted, the day master is supported, the day master thrive with 7 killing. Because in a way, it appears that having strong 7 killing is useful. More so in a world where career represents war, career represents struggle, career represents work. Therefore, having 7 killing or officer would then be auspicious to the career. And therefore, once again, even without going through, we can then try to surmise that if the day master is strong and withstands some killing, then that would be positive. And here comes the fourth, again with 7 killing, and we have the eating god controlling 7 killing formation. And it's always favorable to consider that when you have an output, when you have an output, and the output controls the officer, to which especially when it's a 7. So the formation of eating god controlling 7 killing is always favorable. Because eating god represents sophistication, intelligence, it represents a very knowledgeable person. So output tends to be knowledgeable. Output, whether hurting officer or eating god, they are very intelligent. Output represents intelligence, represents creativity, and therefore here eating god is more of the introvert, and hurting officer is more of the extrovert height. And of course, if they can rein in 7 killing, then therefore that would be useful. And other notable would then be a hurting officer with resource. That would be useful. And of course, there will be other combinations of the same as well. All right. Therefore, here we look into 4 combinations and we try to map it out to the day master. So whenever we see that there are certain harmonic flow a little bit, that would be quite useful. Let's say, for example, for the likes of Steve Jobs, you'll find that there's a wood produces fire, and fire produces earth. Can you see that? So whenever we have wood produces fire, fire produces earth. So therefore, there's a little bit of it. Therefore, here you have your fire produces earth. Therefore, here you have your eating god. Do you have that? You have your eating god. And of course, here you also have your resource. And so for the case of Steve Jobs, might be able to find that this can be the notable combinations. Oh, Claudia noted. Wow, yes. How many? How many are you able to find? You're able to consider that you have here your 1, 2, 3. In fact, if you have so many, it actually becomes hurting officer, right, Claudia? So having 5 EG basically becomes hurting officer. You identify that, yeah? That's it. All right, and so now let's take a look into a bit more, just a short while. I think we will continue this in the following sessions. So we have just, today is just the first day where we open the chapter to look into the career. And so let's take a look into the superior for Steve Jobs. Superior for Steve Jobs, John Scully. So this is John Scully's page. You can find that it's Koi Water. So dragon with wood. And also we find that with your subordinate. Now, there'll be more to come, but at this juncture here, what do we want to map out? What do we want to map? We do find that when uh, looking for people, we'll try to see whether number one, there is affinity or otherwise, whether there's affinity or otherwise, and who supports who in this manner. Into the first part, we find interestingly that both John Scully and Jean Louis, both according to their scheduled useful gods, have missing pink fire. They have missing pink fire. And so where do they find their pink fire for them to prosper? Steve Jobs. That's right. So therefore you can find that the affinity to come. So in a way, Steve Jobs is their solution. So therefore, their livelihood would improve because they have their white gods and they find it. They find it. So we can also say likewise for the case of Steve Jobs, not so much for the superior, but more for maybe we can find it in the subordinate. In the subordinate. Now, naturally, when people come to work together, there must be some kind of affinity. If the people you work together are people that you choose. And of course, in a big organization where HR decided to recruit or somebody else recruit, then you have your colleagues, you have your subordinates, not of your choice. So if it's not of your choice, then of course, not necessarily the affinity will be present. So we would like to look for. And so we do find that Ren and Shen will find itself in monkey. So Ren and Keng together can be found in monkey. So the monkey is present, could be attractive. Now there'll be more to analyze, similar to compatibility, which of course we will try to map it out later. But can you consider that the pillar Wu Earth Yin, Wu Yin, what controls Wu Earth? Wood, so wood controls Earth, and the metal clash with the tiger. So here, as we look into the interrelationship, we can find that a relationship at certain time may involve in a part where the subordinate will clash. They will clash. And so typically in looking at relationships, once again run by me, what are the what are the people to avoid? What are the people that one should avoid? The people that you should avoid most of the time, what are they once again? The people that you should avoid once again would be the Rockwell good blade people. Number two, your Fan Yin. Fu Yin not so bad. Fu Yin is not so bad, but Fan Yin and Rockwell. And so these are the two most important people to avoid. And of course, in the third one, if ever possible, those that clash with your useful gods. Anything that clashes with the useful gods. Therefore, in order to look at it. And the reason why I put that 2 points is because if we advise our client, then it is our client's best interest that we are protecting or that we are referring to. And so if the client is a Rockwell good blade to the superior, well, that can be favorable to the client, favorable to the client. But of course, If the subordinate is a Rockwell good blade to the client, then that can be negative. So hence the reason why there are two charts here, one for the superior, one for the subordinate, because the relationships of Fanyan clash, and punishment and all those relationships, their interpretation will be different, whether you are dealing with your boss or dealing with your client. I mean, it's a practical dog eat dog world. If you betray your boss, we see it as favorable. And of course, if your subordinates betray you, then we see it as unfavorable. I know it's a bit bigoted thinking, but once again, if you're advising the client or here, then we'll look into how the relationship pans out between the two of them. All right, that's just a little bit today. I think 1 hour passes by quite quickly because so many things to talk about. And looks like I'll see you next week to continue on this. And once again, thank you for your feedback. And if you do have any more feedback coming in, please let me know how we can steer this direction and to see what other format that you would like. All right, thank you. Good night and good morning to some of you. I will see you next week then. Thank you.